Welcome to the Deep Dives. Today, we're really embarking on quite an intellectual journey, I think. We're diving deep into, well, one of the most complex but also incredibly insightful works in philosophy, Hegel's Science of Logic.
It's definitely a challenging one. And yeah, it's not logic like, Aristotle or formal logic you might learn in a class.
Right, it's something else entirely.
Yeah.
Hegel calls it a science of pure thought itself, exploring how thought kind of unfolds, recognizes itself, and eventually gets to the essence of truth.
Exactly. And our mission today for this deep dive is really to unpack this huge work, looking at it specifically through Hegel's own method, the dialectic.
Dialectic, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, that whole thing.
That's the framework, yes. But it's much more dynamic than just those labels. As Hegel himself points out in the preface, Kant's philosophy, it changed how we thought about thinking, but traditional logic, it stayed formal, it ignored the actual content of thought.
So Hegel wanted to fix that.
Yeah, pretty much. We're going to trace how thought, starting from the most abstract point imaginable, builds up this entire rich world of being and concepts. We'll see how each concept, the thesis, runs into its own internal opposition, the antithesis, and then resolves into a higher, richer unity, the synthesis.
And crucially, you mentioned this idea of looking back, how the synthesis changes how we see the thesis and antithesis.
Precisely. That retrospective construction is key. The synthesis doesn't just leave the thesis and antithesis behind. It actually reshapes our understanding of them, clarifies the difference between them, but now within a unified whole.
And this happens at every single step, because science of logic is massive.
Every step, it's brimming with these internal contradictions and this dynamic movement. So we're not just looking at the big sections like being, essence, concept.
Like the main parts.
We're going to really try and focus on each subdivision, delve into the chapters, the key arguments, and see that dialectical process unfold within each one.
Sounds like quite the undertaking.
Yeah.
So where do we start? The beginning of the objective logic. The doctrine of being.
Absolutely. Got to start at the start. Hegel insists logic can't just assume any rules of thinking beforehand. Why? Because those rules are part of what logic needs to explain. They have to emerge from within.
So no prepackaged assumptions.
None. The absolute beginning has to be, well, the most basic thing possible. Pure being.
Pure being. Okay, that sounds about as abstract as it gets.
Yeah.
What is that exactly?
Well, that's our initial thesis. Think about it, just isness, pure presence, but with absolutely no determination, no qualities, no limits, no characteristics whatsoever. It's what Hegel calls indeterminate immediacy.
Sure being, without being anything in particular.
Exactly. It's so pure, so empty, you can't really grasp anything about it. It's like the sheer possibility of existence before anything specific exists.
Okay, but if it's completely indeterminate, like totally empty, how is that different from, well, nothing?
You hit the nail on the head. That's the natural move to the antithesis. If being has zero determination, then in its pure emptiness, it's indistinguishable from nothing. That's pure nothing, the antithesis.
Oh, they're the same?
In a way, yes, at this extreme level of abstraction. Hegel is careful, though. He doesn't mean the beginning is just nothingness, like a void. It's the nothing that is about to give rise to being. They kind of blur into each other because neither has any content to distinguish it.
Okay, so we have pure being as the thesis, pure nothing is the antithesis. They seem to collapse into each other. What's the synthesis? What emerges from this?
The synthesis is becoming. Hegel famously says pure being and pure nothing are the same. But he immediately clarifies, the truth isn't being alone or nothing alone.
It's the transition.
Exactly. It's the movement between them. Being passing into nothing and nothing passing into being. And it's not just a passing through. It's like it's already happened. It's inherent in them. They are absolutely different, yet totally inseparable. And they constantly vanish into each other.
So it's not a state, it's a process, like flickering.
That's a good way to think about it. This constant restless movement, this oscillation that's becoming. It's inherently unstable.
Okay, that's a really interesting concept. Now, how does becoming, as the synthesis, help us understand being and nothing differently when we look back, that retrospective part?
Right. Becoming shows us how these seemingly total opposites are actually united through this internal movement.
Right.
The unity isn't static. It's this restless motion, what Hegel calls an absolute unity.
So looking back.
Looking back from becoming, we grasp that pure being was only pure because it implicitly contained its vanishing into nothing. And pure nothing was only pure because it implicitly contained the potential to become being.
Ah, so they weren't really separate static things to begin with.
Exactly. They become interdependent moments within the process of becoming. They define each other through their opposition and transition. And it's this dynamic unity, this preservation of being and nothing within their movement that forms the next stage, determinate being, or Dasein.
Dosing. Wait, so we've moved from pure abstraction and flux to
Yeah.
something degenerate. What is Dasein, and how does its own dialectic work?
Dasein is basically when becoming kind of stabilizes, it settles down. The unity of being and nothing isn't just flux anymore. It's resulted in an existence that has some specific quality, some determination. It's no longer just being, it's being something. It contains that unity of being and nothing, and that unity becomes the sort of measure for its quality.
So what's the starting point, the thesis within Dasein?
The thesis here is being in itself. This is the thing as it exists just in itself, its own self-identity, its inner nature, independent of anything else. Hegel says it's no longer immediate like pure being. It relates to itself by sort of implicitly negating otherness. Think of it as the core whatness of a thing.
Its internal essence, maybe?
Kind of, yeah. Before we consider how it relates to other things.
Okay, so if that's the in itself, where's the tension? What's the antithesis?
The antithesis is being for other. This is the flip side. It's the aspect of the thing that is defined by its relation to others, how it's limited, how it appears externally. It's how it exists for something else.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about, say, a coffee mug. Its being in itself might be its ceramic nature, its basic form.
Yeah.
Its being for other is its function as a mug holding coffee, being held, being seen on your desk. It's defined by its relationship to coffee, to you, to the table.
I see. The internal nature versus its external relations and functions. So what's the synthesis that brings these together?
Their synthesis is something. Something is what holds both being in itself and being for other together in unity. It's a determinate being, but it crucially has determination, constitution, and also a limit.
A limit.
Yes, and this limit is key. Something is defined by its limit, what separates it from other somethings, but this limit also creates an internal tension and unrest. The something is constantly pushing against its own limit, trying to go beyond itself. This internal contradiction is its drive to transcend.
Like the point becoming a line.
Exactly. That's a great example Hegel uses. A point, limited as it is, generates a line by moving beyond its quaintness. The line generates a plane, the plane generates space. Each stage transcends the limits of the previous one, driven by that internal tension.
That makes something sound really active, not static at all. So looking back from something, how does this change our view of being in itself and being for other?
It shows they aren't just two separate aspects slapped together. Something reveals how Dasein itself evolves from that initial flux of being and nothing into something definite, but something with internal contradictions driving it forward.
So they're inherently linked.
Deeply linked. We now understand that being in itself establishes itself through its relation to the other, being for other, and vice versa. The limit isn't just an external boundary, it's also the otherness that the something carries within itself. And when something pushes beyond that internal limit,
Yes. What happens then?
that limit becomes a restriction.
A restriction. How does that work?
Well, when something tries to go beyond its inherent limit, but is still held back or defined by that very limit, you get this tension. This gives rise to the ought.
The ought. Like what should be.
Sort of. It's the sense that the thing should be more than its current limited state. It's the beginning of finitude reaching towards infinity. It's the first inkling of self-transcendence.
Which leads us directly to the finite and the infinite, right?
Yeah.
How does that dialectic play out?
Right. So in the ought, finitude seems to vanish into infinity. But Hegel warns against what he calls the bad infinite.
The bad infinite. What's that?
That's thinking of infinity as just endlessly going on, but never really escaping the finite. Like counting numbers forever, you never reach a true infinity, just an endless repetition of the finite. It's an infinity that's still limited because it's defined purely in opposition to the finite as something over there.
So what's the true infinite for Hegel?
The true infinite isn't separate from the finite. It's realized in and through the finite. It's the self-transcendence of the finite itself. It's the process of the finite constantly overcoming its own limitations. It's a unity of finite and infinite. The understanding struggles with this. It wants to keep them separate, but that misses the negativity, the self-overcoming inherent in the infinite process.
That's a really different way of thinking about infinity. So how do all these tensions within Dasein, the limit, the ought, the finite infinite, push us to the next stage, being for itself?
It's precisely these internal contradictions, the fact that something is defined by its limit, but also driven to transcend it, the tension between finite and infinite that propels the concept forward. The resolution is found in being for itself, which is a higher level of unity. It's achieved self-containment.
Self-contained. How so?
Being for itself is pure self-relation. It relates only to itself by actively excluding otherness. It's achieved a kind of independence.
Okay, so what's the thesis within being for itself?
The thesis is the one. Think of it as the result of negating all otherness. It's pure, self-contained identity, a single, indivisible unit that defines itself by pushing everything else away.
Just one. Simple enough. But if it excludes everything else, does it create its own internal opposition? An antithesis?
It has to. By the very act of excluding others to define itself as one, it implicitly posits those others it excludes. Its self-definition relies on pushing away, well, other ones.
Ah, so the act of being one creates.
The many, that's the antithesis. The one necessarily splinters into the many. Each one in the many asserts itself by repelling the others.
Repelling. Okay, so they have the one and the many. What's the synthesis here? How do they come together?
The synthesis is found in the interplay of repulsion and attraction. Repulsion is that inherent tendency of the one to push others away, creating the many, but the many only exist as ones, they presuppose the one, and simultaneously these repelling ones, by simply existing together, also imply an attraction, a tendency to aggregate, to relate back to the unity of the one.
So repulsion creates the many, but attraction pulls them back towards the one.
Exactly. And crucially, repulsion and attraction aren't external forces acting on the ones. They are the internal dynamic of the one itself. It's how being for itself maintains its unity through its inherent multiplicity.
Did Hegel use this to critique any philosophical ideas of his time? Like atomism?
He absolutely did. He heavily criticized atomism for taking the one, the atom, and the void, nothing essentially, as the fundamental reality. He saw this as abstract, as the most complete externality.
Why external?
Because it treats the atoms as just, existing side by side, qualitatively complete in themselves, ignoring their inherent relationship, the repulsion and attraction that are internal to them. Atomism misses the dialectical unity, the inner life of the one and the many.
Okay, that makes sense. So looking back again, how does understanding being for itself through repulsion and attraction change our view of the one and the many?
It shows us that the one isn't just a static, isolated unit. It's inherently dynamic. It maintains its identity through the act of self-differentiation, repulsion, and self-unification, attraction. The one is the process of becoming the many and returning to one.
It's a self-sustaining movement.
Precisely. And this dynamic, this unity of repulsion and attraction of the one and the many, lays the foundation for the next major category, quantity. Because this movement establishes a kind of indifference, the ones and the many are qualitatively the same, their difference becomes quantitative. Pure quantity emerges as the unity of continuity and discreteness.
Right. So we're moving from quality, being for itself, to quantity.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into the doctrine of quantity. Here, the focus shifts from what something is to how much.
Right.
And indifference to quality.
Exactly. Determination is no longer about exclusive quality, but about an amount that can change without altering the thing's essence, up to a point. We start with pure quantity.
And its thesis.
The thesis for pure quantity is discreteness. Think of quantity as being made up of distinct units, like individual points or numbers. The one, as a possibility, is everywhere within quantity, highlighting this discrete aspect.
Okay, distinct units. What's the antithesis?
The antithesis is continuity. Remember that attraction aspect of the one, that internal pull towards unity? Here it manifests as continuity. Despite being composed of discrete units, quantity also has this inherent flow, this connectedness. The units aren't just isolated, they form a continuum.
Like points making up a continuous line.
Precisely. You can always find another point between any 2 points. That's the continuity aspect.
So discrete units, but also a continuous flow, the synthesis.
The synthesis is pure quantity itself. It's the inherent unity of discreteness and continuity. Quantity is, at the same time, divisible into units, discrete and yet seamlessly connected, continuous. Spinoza had a similar idea. Quantity understood through imagination is finite and divisible, but through intellect, it's infinite and indivisible. Hegel sees both aspects as essential to pure quantity.
How does understanding pure quantity as this unity change how we see discreteness and continuity retrospectively?
It shows they aren't separate things. Mathematical ideas like points, lines, planes aren't just built up from discrete units, they are expressions of an underlying continuity. Pure quantity abstracts from sensory details to reveal this structure an internal unity that allows for both division and connection.
So discreteness needs continuity to connect the units, and continuity needs discreteness to have anything to connect.
You could put it that way, yes. They mutually presuppose each other within pure quantity. This gives quantity its abstract, universal character.
Okay. Now, when pure quantity gets a specific determination, it becomes quantum, right? A specific quantity.
Yeah.
How does the dialectic unfold here?
Right. Quantum is determined quantity. The thesis within quantum is number. A number like 5 is a specific determined quantum. It's a definite 1, in a way, but Hegel notes it's indifferent to other numbers. 5 isn't inherently related to 6 or 7. Their relation is external, based on comparison.
Just a fixed amount. What's the antithesis to number?
The antithesis emerges from within number itself. It's amount. Any number, say 5, isn't just the single concept 5, it's also an amount composed of units, 5 ones. This distinction between the unity of the number and the plurality of its units is inherent. This externality or multiplicity is within the number itself.
The number as a whole versus the units that make it up. What's the synthesis here?
The synthesis is what Hegel calls the internal contradiction of quantum. The very nature of quantum, number or amount, involves this tension between its unity and its multiplicity, its defined limit, and its inherent indifference to other quanta. This internal contradiction isn't a flaw. It's the driving force for the further development of quantity, especially through mathematical operations. It reveals the qualitative aspect within quantity.
Interesting. So looking back from this internal contradiction, how do we see number and amount differently?
We see that a number isn't just a static label for a quantity. It's a dynamic unity holding together the concepts of unit and amount. This inherent tension pushes quantity beyond simple counting and into operations, ultimately revealing, especially in calculus, its underlying qualitative nature. It prepares the ground for thinking about ratio and eventually measure.
You mentioned operations calculus. Hegel had some strong views there, didn't he? Let's break down the dialectic of calculation.
He did. He saw calculation as quantity working out its own contradictions. You start with addition and subtraction, very external, just combining or separating in different numbers.
Basic arithmetic.
Then multiplication is a step up. It introduces that unit amount distinction more clearly. Multiplying 3 by 4 means taking the unit 3 and amount 4 times, unifying them. Powers, like 3 squared, are even more unified. The number determines its own change. The unit and amount are the same, 3 times 3.
Okay, but calculus, that seems like a bigger leap. How does it reveal the qualitative determination you mentioned?
This is where Hegel gets quite critical of his contemporaries, like Kant and Euler. He felt they misunderstood infinitesimals, like dx in calculus. They treated them as just 0, or practically 0.
Which they kind of are quantitatively.
Quantitatively, yes, they approach 0, but Hegel insisted they have a qualitative significance. They represent a qualitative moment, a ratio, like d at x. The point of calculus, for Hegel, isn't just calculating slopes or areas. It's about grasping the point where quantitative change becomes qualitative change. It reveals the qualitative ratio inherent in the function, not just approximating it. The differential coefficient isn't just an equation, it's a qualitative relationship expressed quantitatively.
Oh, that's a much deeper view of calculus than just finding derivatives.
Hmm.
So this revelation of quality within quantity leads to the next stage, quantitative ratio.
Exactly. The internal contradiction worked out through operations, especially calculus, shows that quantity isn't just more or less, it has these intrinsic qualitative relationships, these ratios. This propels the concept into the quantitative ratio.
Okay, let's unpack quantitative ratio. What's the initial thesis here?
The thesis is direct ratio. Think of something like y equals x. The determination of each quantum, y and x, is found in their mutual relationship, defined by the ratio a, the exponent, in Hegel's broader sense. There's one governing determination.
The straightforward relationship. What's the antithesis?
The antithesis arises from looking at the components within the ratio, unit and amount. The ratio relates two quantities, and each quantity inherently involves the unit amount distinction we saw earlier. These aspects appear as independent quanta within the ratio structure.
So the overall ratio versus the components it relates?
Sort of, yes. It's the tension between the unifying ratio and the distinct quantities it holds together.
And the synthesis that resolves this?
The synthesis is the qualitatively determined quantum. The ratio itself, the exponent a and yx, for example, isn't just a number. It's a qualitative determination expressed in quantitative terms. It embodies the specific nature of the relationship. This means quantity has now clearly developed an internal qualitative dimension.
It's not just how much, but how much relates.
Exactly. It's about the quality of the quantitative relationship.
So looking back from this qualitatively determined quantum, how do direct ratio and unit and amount look different?
We see that a direct ratio isn't just an empty mathematical formula. Its exponent embodies a qualitative meaning. And the unit and amount within the related quanta aren't just mechanical parts. They gain their significance from the qualitative relationship expressed in the ratio. This whole development revealing the qualitative dimension within quantity leads directly to the next major stage: measure.
Measure. Okay, so this is the third part of the objective logic. And measure is where quality and quantity explicitly come together, right? They determine each other.
Precisely. Measure is their unity. It's about the specific quantity required for certain quality and vice versa.
So what's the thesis for measure?
The thesis is external quantum. Think of a general measure applied from the outside, like measuring temperature with a thermometer. The scale, degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit, is an external quantitative scale applied uniformly. The change is just arithmetic increase or decrease.
A standard measurement. What's the antithesis?
The antithesis is immanent measure. This recognizes that the thing being measured has its own internal way of relating to that quantity. Different objects react differently to the same external temperature change, right? Think specific heat capacity. A substance has its own internal measure that determines how it absorbs or expresses that external quantity. The change isn't just proportional to the external input.
Ah, so the object's own properties affect the measurement, the synthesis.
The synthesis is real measure, or specific measure. This is where the external quantity and the internal qualitative response are unified. It's the specific, concrete measure appropriate to a particular thing, embodying the necessary relationship between its quality and quantity. Think of things like boiling points or freezing points, specific quantitative thresholds tied to a qualitative change.
And this leads to that famous idea about leaps, doesn't it? Hegel arguing against nature does not make leaps.
Absolutely. The qualitative leap is central to measure. Gradual quantitative change reaches a point, a nodal point, we might say, where it suddenly triggers a qualitative transformation. Water doesn't get gradually harder as it cools. It hits 0 degrees C at standard pressure and leaps into a different state: ice. Hegel insists these leaps aren't exceptions. They are the necessary result of quantitative changes reaching the limit inherent in a specific measure.
So measure defines the breaking point. How does understanding real measure change our view of external quantum and immanent measure retrospectively?
It shows that external quantum isn't just arbitrary. Its significance lies in its potential to reach the threshold defined by the immanent measure. And the immanent measure isn't static. It expresses itself precisely at those nodal points where quantity tips over into a new quality. Real measure reveals their inherent connection, the specific quantitative condition for a specific qualitative state. And this whole exploration of measure, this unity of quality and quantity, marks the transition out of the doctrine of being and into the next major sphere: essence.
Right, the doctrine of essence. This feels like a shift. We're moving from the immediacy of being to something deeper, more reflective.
Exactly. Essence is about what underlies being, the inner ground, the reflection of being into itself. It's being sublated, preserved, but overcome. It's about self-manifestation. We start with essence and reflection.
Okay, essence and reflection. Thesis.
The initial thesis is the immediacy of essence. At first, we might think of essence as just the simple underlying identity of a thing, like the isness of being, but now seen as the core wetness, its abstract identity.
Just the basic core. Antithesis.
The antithesis is the unessential, or shine, sometimes seeming. This is everything else: the surface appearances, the changing aspects, the leftover bits of immediate being that aren't the core essence. It's seen as superficial, maybe even illusory, hiding the true essence.
The deep truth versus the surface appearance. What's the synthesis that brings them together?
The synthesis is reflection. Essence isn't static or hidden behind appearance. Essence is the process of reflecting on itself, distinguishing itself from the unessential, shine, but also manifesting through it. Essence determines its own immediacy itself as negativity, shine, and then determines that negativity, shine, as immediacy itself. It's a dynamic, self-differentiating, self-manifesting process.
This sounds connected to identity and difference. Didn't Hegel critique the basic law of identity, AA?
He certainly did, right here. He called AA an empty tautology. It tells us nothing. His point was more profound. Identity always involves difference. To even say identity is different from difference implies that identity contains difference within itself. For Hegel, contradiction isn't a mistake to be avoided, it's the source of all movement, life, and vitality. Things are real and concepts are meaningful precisely because they hold opposing determinations together in unity.
That's a radical view of contradiction. So reflection is this active process of self-differentiation. Looking back, how does it change our view of immediacy of essence and shine?
It shows essence isn't some hidden core separate from the surface. Essence is the process of returning to itself through the negativity of shine. Shine isn't just illusion, it's the necessary way essence appears, the way it manifests itself. The initial immediacy of essence can only be grasped because it differentiates itself via shine. They are moments in the single process of reflection, and this process, this self-manifestation through internal relations, establishes the next category, ground.
Ground. Okay, so essence, through reflection, establishes itself as the ground or reason for things. It provides the internal determination. What's the thesis for ground?
The thesis is formal ground. This is often just a tautology, restating the phenomenon as its own ground without real explanation, like saying opium puts you to sleep because it has a dormitive virtue, or Hegel's example, planets orbit the sun because of gravity. It just names the phenomenon again in a seemingly explanatory form, but adds no real content. It's abstract and external.
Just giving it a label. Antithesis.
The antithesis is the grounded. This is the phenomenon or result that is supposedly explained by the ground, but it's seen as passive, merely receiving its determination from the ground, and might even contain contingent elements not fully explained by the formal ground.
The explanation versus what's being explained. Synthesis.
The synthesis is real ground. Here, ground and grounded aren't external to each other. They are internally unified. A real ground contains the sufficient reason within itself for the specific characteristics of the grounded. The ground differentiates itself into the grounded. Essence itself contains the formal differences that lead to the phenomenon.
Did Hegel apply this to bigger concepts like nature or God?
Yes, he critiqued common ways of thinking about ground there too. If you say nature is the ground of the world, but the world contains things, like human history, not reducible to nature, then nature isn't a real ground. Similarly, if God as a universal ground doesn't explain the specific diversity of nature, it remains a formal ground. True ground has to contain the principle of its own concrete manifestation.
It has to explain the specifics. So retrospectively, how does real ground illuminate formal ground and the grounded?
It shows that a true explanation isn't just attaching an external label, formal ground. It's revealing the internal necessity, real ground, that unfolds into the phenomenon, the grounded. The emptiness of formal ground pushes thought towards finding the real ground, and the seeming passivity of the grounded is overcome when we see it as the necessary expression of the real ground. This whole dynamic, the ground needing to manifest its content, leads inevitably to the realm of appearance.
Appearance. Essence must appear, right?
Yeah.
When ground sublates itself, we get appearance, concrete existence produced through this process of grounding and differentiation. Thesis.
The thesis within appearance is the law of appearance. Even amidst the changing flux of phenomena, there's an underlying stable pattern, a law. This law represents the self-identity, the enduring content within the changing appearances. Think of scientific laws describing regularities in the phenomenal world.
The stable pattern and the flux. Antithesis.
The antithesis is the world in itself, or essential world. This arises from reflecting on the change and flux itself. This constant change points to an underlying reality, a world behind the appearances, which is thought to be the true, stable essence. It's the form, the absolute negativity, whose moments have their own independent being, contrasting with the immediate sensory diversity of appearance.
The unchanging law versus the hidden reality behind change.
Synthesis.
The synthesis is relation. The world in itself isn't actually hidden. It appears in the phenomena through their relations. And the phenomena, in turn, are taken up into the essential relations of the world in itself. Essence manifests in and as the relations of the appearing world.
How do concepts like whole and parts, or force and expression, fit into this relation? They are key examples of these essential relations within appearance. Whole and parts shows the quantitative dialectic, continuity discreteness, reappearing within essence. The whole defines the parts constitute the whole. Separating one immediately implies the other. Force in expression is crucial. Force isn't some hidden thing. It only exists in its expression. And the expression is precisely the manifestation of the force. They are two sides of the same coin, revealing the dynamic interplay within the phenomenal world.
So force needs expression. Expression needs force. Looking back from relation, how do law of appearance and world in itself look?
Relation shows us that the law isn't just an external pattern imposed on appearances. It's the structure of their essential interrelation. And the world in itself isn't some unknowable thing in itself hidden behind a veil. It is the totality of these essential relations manifesting as appearance. Appearance isn't illusion, it is the way essence exists. And the truth of this manifested relational essence leads us to the final stage of essence, actuality.
Actuality. Okay, the culmination of essence. Here, essence fully manifests its truth. It's the unity of inner essence and outer appearance where immediacy is determined as reflection and vice versa. Thesis.
The thesis is formal possibility. This is just abstract potential that in itself as mere possibility without any concrete content or determination. Like, it's possible it might rain. It's just an empty can be.
Pure potential. Antithesis.
The antithesis is formal actuality. This is just immediate, unreflected existence. Something simply is, but without any sense of necessity or grounding. It's contingent, just a given fact. The is without the why.
Possibility versus brute fact. Synthesis.
Their synthesis is contingency. This is where possibility and actuality meet in a direct, unstable unity. Something is actual, but it could have been otherwise. Its actuality isn't yet grounded in necessity. It's the immediate flickering between inner potential and outer existence.
So things just happen to be the way they are. How does contingency then develop into necessity?
It has to. Contingency contains the seeds of necessity. It unfolds through stages. First, real possibility. This isn't just abstract possibility, but the concrete conditions and circumstances that make something possible. Then, real actuality, the determined, reflected actuality standing against mere possibility.
Okay.
Their unity is relative necessity, where the actuality flows from its conditions, but the conditions themselves might still be contingent. It's necessary relative to its conditions.
Like A causes B, but what caused A?
Exactly. The final step is absolute necessity. Here, the actuality is fully self-grounded. Its possibility and actuality are completely unified. It could not be otherwise. This is the unity of contingency and necessity itself. The contingency is sublated into the necessary unfolding of the thing's own nature.
And where do causality and reciprocal action come in under absolute necessity?
Causality is a key form of necessity. The cause contains the ground, and it realizes itself in the effect. But Hegel shows this is still limited. The cause is affected by the effect, and often the effect becomes a cause for something else.
It's not a one-way street.
No. It ultimately develops into reciprocal action or interaction. Everything is interconnected. Causes are effects, effects are causes. This overcomes the simple linear chain and shows a system where everything mutually determines everything else. This is the highest form of necessity in the objective world.
So, looking back from absolute necessity and reciprocal action, how do we understand possibility, actuality, and contingency differently?
We see that actuality isn't just brute fact. Its truth lies in its necessity. Possibility isn't just empty abstraction. It's the inherent potential within actuality that drives towards necessary realization. And contingency isn't mere randomness. It's the unresolved tension that pushes towards the self-grounding of absolute necessity. The whole journey through actuality shows the ultimate unity of being. In essence, what is truly real is that which necessarily manifests its own inner ground through reciprocal interaction. And this realization, this absolute necessity where cause and effect merge, that is the threshold to the final major part of the logic, the concept, thought recognizing itself.
Wow, okay, the subjective logic, the doctrine of the concept. We've moved from being through essence and now into the realm where thought thinks itself. Absolute necessity is the concept. It's the highest form, truth, existing in and for itself. What's the thesis of the concept itself?
The thesis is universality. The concept first appears as pure, self-relating universality. Think of a general concept like animal. It's universal because it applies to many individuals, but it achieves this universality by abstracting from or negating their specific differences. It's absolute determination that is also the negation of determination.
The general idea. Antithesis.
The antithesis is singularity. Universality has to differentiate itself. It negates itself to produce the concrete individual, the singular instance, like this specific dog, Fido. Singularity is self-relating negativity, the concrete this.
Universal versus the individual instance. Synthesis.
The synthesis is particularity. This mediates between the universal and the singular. Think of dog as a particular kind of animal, universal, which is embodied in Fido, singular. Particularity contains both the universal, animal nature, and the singular, the specific dog. It's the unity where the universal gets its concrete content and the singular gets its essential determination. It's the universal differentiating itself freely.
So looking back from particularity, how do we see universality and singularity? Did Hegel contrast this with Kant?
Yes, he strongly disagreed with Kant's separation of concepts, subjective, from things in themselves, objective. For Hegel, the concept is the truth of the thing. Universality isn't just an empty abstraction. It realizes itself through particularity and singularity. And singularity isn't just a brute fact. It embodies the universal. They aren't separate realms. They are moments of the concept's own self-movement, its internal differentiation and realization.
Okay, now when the concept's determinations are explicitly set out, we get judgment, right? Connecting the universal and the singular particular. Thesis of judgment.
The thesis is the subject. This is the individual thing or idea that the judgment is about. It starts as something immediate, seemingly self-contained, like the rose in The Rose is Red.
The thing being judged. Antithesis.
The antithesis is the predicate. This is the universal quality or concept being applied to the subject, is red. The predicate reflects on the subject, bringing out one of its universal aspects, thereby sublating the subject's initial, simple immediacy. The rose isn't just rose, it's brought under the universal redness.
Subject versus predicate. Synthesis.
The synthesis is the truth of judgment. In the act of judging, the subject, the rose, is shown not to be merely singular, but capable of embodying universality, redness. And the predicate, redness, is shown not to be merely abstract, but something realized in the singular subject. The judgment reveals the inherent unity of the universal and the singular within the concept itself.
So retrospectively, judgment changes how we see subject and predicate.
Absolutely. It shows the subject isn't just a static individual. It contains universality implicitly, which the predicate makes explicit. And the predicate isn't just floating free. It finds its reality in the subject. Judgment is the process of the concept dividing itself, subject-predicate, and then recognizing its unity within that division. This movement, this self-differentiation and return to unity, sets the stage for the syllogism.
The syllogism. Okay, this is where the concept uses mediation to return to itself, to realize its unity more fully. Thesis.
The thesis is the extremes. These are the universal and the singular aspects from the judgment, now seen as the starting and ending points that need to be connected, like Socrates, singular, and mortal, universal, in the classic example.
The two ends to be linked. Antithesis.
The antithesis is the middle term. This is the particular concept that links the extremes. In all humans are mortal, Socrates is a human, therefore Socrates is mortal. The middle term is human, particularity. It connects the singularity, Socrates, to the universality, mortal, seemingly externally.
Synthesis.
The synthesis is the objective significance of syllogism. The middle term isn't just an external link, it reveals the internal connection. It shows how the singular Socrates partakes in the universal mortality, namely through its particularity, being human. The syllogism demonstrates the concept realizing its own unity through these mediated steps. Singularity enters existence via particularity and finds its truth in universality.
Did Hegel critique the way logic usually treated syllogisms?
Yes, vehemently. He attacked formal logic, like Leibniz's attempts at a logical calculus, for treating the syllogism as just a mechanical manipulation of terms, empty forms. He argued this completely missed the spiritual nature of the concept, the way the terms dynamically relate and sublate their initial meanings in the process of reasoning. It wasn't just about validity, it was about the concept realizing its own truth.
So looking back from the objective significance, how do extremes and middle term appear?
We see the extremes aren't fundamentally separate. Their connection through the middle term reveals their inherent unity within the concept. And the middle term isn't just a bridge, it's the active process of the concept differentiating itself into particularity in order to unify its universality and singularity. The syllogism is the concept fully realizing its structure, universal, particular, singular. And this self-realization prepares the concept to move beyond subjective thought into objectivity.
Objectivity. Okay, the concept steps out of itself, so to speak. Its realized structure now appears in the external world, but initially in a somewhat external, indifferent form. First stage, mechanism. Thesis.
The thesis is the object in general, just objects existing side by side in space and time, largely indifferent to each other. A collection or aggregate where determinations are just sort of placed within them externally.
Just stuff existing. Antithesis.
The antithesis is external activity. Objects interact, but only externally through pushes and pulls, impacts. Mechanical processes impart motion or change from the outside, eventually leading to equilibrium or rest. Think billiard balls colliding.
External forces acting on objects. Synthesis.
The synthesis is the product of a mechanical process. Through these external interactions, the object actually develops a kind of internal determination, a structure resulting from the process. It contracts back into itself, becoming a more defined objective individual, not just an indifferent part of an aggregate.
So retrospectively, how does the product illuminate the object and activity?
It shows that mechanism, while describing external indifferent relations, isn't entirely devoid of the concept. The object in general has the potential for determination through external activity, and the product reveals that determination becoming actual. Even in mechanism, the concept structure is implicitly present, paving the way for more internally driven objective relations like chemism and teleology.
Chemism. Okay, this is the next stage in objectivity. It moves beyond the indifference of mechanism, right? More internal tension.
Exactly. Chemism is the first negation of mechanism. Objects aren't just indifferent, they have specific affinities, internal tensions, they seek each other out to combine or neutralize. The thesis is objects in a state of tension. Think of an acid and a base, they aren't indifferent, they actively seek to react.
That internal drive.
Antithesis.
The antithesis is the formal and external middle term. Chemical reactions often require external conditions or catalysts, a solvent, heat, pressure. These act as a sort of middle term, enabling the object's intention to combine and form a neutral product.
The conditions for the reaction. Synthesis.
The synthesis is the self-realizing concept hyosphere. The chemical process and its product aren't just a static outcome. They represent the concept realizing itself under these objective conditions. Chemism points beyond itself. It sets up the conditions for its own realization, and in doing so, prepares the transition to a higher form where the concept is more explicitly realized teleology. So looking back from this self-realizing concept, how do objects in tension and the external middle term look?
We see the tension wasn't just random affinity, it was the objective manifestation of the concept's inherent drive towards unity through difference. And the external middle term wasn't just incidental, it played a necessary mediating role for the concept to realize itself in the chemical product. Chemism shows objects having intrinsic relations, moving beyond mechanism, but still limited by externality, pointing towards purpose or teleology.
Teleology, purpose.
Yeah.
The final stage of objectivity. Here, the concept realizes itself as purpose within the objective world, overcoming the limitations of mechanism and chemism. Thesis.
The thesis is subjective purpose. This is purpose as conceived in a mind and intention. The concept exists as an aim or goal within a subject, but it's still separate from the objective world needed to realize it. It's an I intend to.
The idea or plan. Antithesis.
The antithesis is the external means. These are the objects in the world that are used externally, mechanically, to achieve the subjective purpose. The hammer, the nails, the wood used by the purpose but external to it.
The tools and materials. Synthesis.
The synthesis is objective purpose, or inner purposive connection. Here, the purpose isn't just using the means externally, it actively shapes and internalizes them. The means become part of the realized purpose. Hegel's famous example. The plow is more honorable than the immediate enjoyments procured by it. Why? Because the plow embodies the rational purpose, agriculture, which transcends immediate consumption. Purpose and means become internally unified in the realized end.
The purpose is realized in and through the means. So retrospectively, how does objective purpose illuminate subjective purpose and external means?
It shows that subjective purpose isn't just an empty wish. It has the power to organize and transform external means to realize itself. And the means aren't just inert objects, they become imbued with the purpose they serve. Teleology reveals the concept actively determining the objective world according to its own ends. This unity of concept and objectivity where purpose is realized is the threshold to the final highest sphere, the idea.
The idea. The grand finale of the science of logic. This is the absolute unity of the concept and actuality, the absolute truth, the concept thinking itself as objective reality.
Yeah.
Where do we start within the idea?
With life.
Yes, life is the first immediate form of the idea. The thesis here is inanimate objectivity. This is the world as described by mechanism and chemism and external diverse objects, seemingly without inner unity or self-purpose. The raw material, if you like.
The non-living world, antithesis. The antithesis is the individual subject. This emerges from objectivity but stands apart as a center of self-awareness, a negative unity imposing its conceptual form on the objective world. It presupposes that objectivity but defines itself against it.
The self-conscious being versus the world. Synthesis.
The synthesis is life itself. Here, the concept isn't just in a subject looking at an object. The concept is the soul that permeates the objective body. Life is the concrete unity of concept, soul, and actuality, body. An organism isn't just a mechanism or chemical process, it's a self-organizing, self-maintaining whole, where every part serves the purpose of the whole and the whole sustains the parts. Its intrinsic teleology realized.
The organism as the living idea. So, looking back from life itself, how do inanimate objectivity and individual subject appear?
Life shows that inanimate objectivity isn't just dead matter. It's the necessary basis and material which the idea organizes into a living whole. And the individual subject isn't radically separate. Its conceptual unity finds its concrete reality in the living organism. Life is the immediate unity of the concept and its objective reality, setting the stage for the idea to become conscious of itself in cognition.
The idea of cognition. The idea thinking about itself and the world. Thesis.
The thesis is finite cognition. This is cognition as we usually experience it, trying to understand an objective world that seems separate from thought. It's caught in contradictions, like Kant's problem of the unknowable thing in itself. It wants truth, but feels limited.
Our everyday struggle to know things.
Antithesis.
The antithesis is presupposed objectivity. This is the objective world that finite cognition takes as given, as something out there, independent, perhaps even resistant to being fully known. Yet, crucially, it's an objectivity that can be structured and grasped by the concept.
The world is the object of knowing. Synthesis. The synthesis is the positive activity of cognition. Cognition isn't just passively receiving information about a separate object. It actively determines the object through concepts, definitions, classifications, proofs. In doing so, cognition finds its own structures, the concept, within the object. It recognizes itself in the objective world, overcoming the separation.
What about things like definition and proof here? Hegel had critiques.
Yes, he criticized merely empirical definitions, listing accidental features, or formal proofs that don't grasp the inner necessity. True cognition, for Hegel, involves grasping the object's conceptual essence and demonstrating its necessary development, not just describing appearances or manipulating symbols. Analytic cognition just rearranges what's known. Synthetic cognition grasps the unity in difference, the necessary connections.
So, looking back from this positive activity, how do finite cognition and presupposed objectivity look?
Finite cognition's limitations are overcome not by giving up, but by actively engaging with and structuring presupposed objectivity. The object world isn't ultimately alien. Its rationality is revealed through the activity of the concept. Cognition realizes its own conceptual structure is the structure of reality. This active unification leads directly to the final stage, the absolute idea.
The absolute idea, the summit, the truth of truth. Concept and actuality in perfect absolute unity. Cognition and reality are one. Absolute self-knowledge. What can possibly be the thesis here?
Paradoxically, the thesis looks back to the very beginning. Abstract universality being. The absolute idea recognizes its own starting point was that simple, seemingly empty being. That initial immediacy contained, implicitly, the entire journey.
The whole process was contained in the start. Antithesis.
The antithesis is dialectic as negativity. This reflects on the entire dialectical method itself, but particularly how it often appears negatively, just finding contradictions, leading to skepticism, or showing the limits of thought, like in some traditional uses of dialectic.
The method seen as potentially destructive or limited. Synthesis.
The synthesis is dialectic as positive result. This is Hegel's final validation of his method. The negativity of dialectic isn't just destructive, it's the engine of progress. Contradiction isn't failure, it's the source of life and movement. The absolute idea grasps that the entire logical progression, with all its negations and sublations, wasn't just a journey away from the beginning, but also a process of grounding the beginning. The end circles back to justify the start. The method itself is the content. The form is the content.
So the journey itself creates the truth it discovers. It sounds like the self-manifestation of the absolute idea.
Exactly. The absolute idea isn't contemplating something else. It is the process of its own self-manifestation. It's pure thought thinking, pure thought. It's the concept knowing itself absolutely, where subject and object, thought and being are completely unified. It doesn't point beyond itself. It is the self-contained, self-knowing totality. Actuality is nothing other than the idea manifesting itself.
And looking back from this peak, how does the absolute idea illuminate the starting point being and the method, dialectic as negativity?
It provides the ultimate retrospective construction. We now understand that initial abstract being wasn't truly empty. It held the potential for this entire conceptual unfolding. And the negativity of the dialectic wasn't just about opposition. It was the very process through which the idea differentiates, develops, and enriches itself, ultimately returning to itself as a concrete, self-aware totality. The absolute idea sublates all previous partial categories, integrating their truth into its own complete self-understanding.
Well, that was quite a journey. We went from the bare minimum, being and nothing, all the way to the absolute idea where thought knows itself completely. It's incredible how Hegel builds it step by step, showing that dialectical movement, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and that crucial look back at every single stage.
It really is a monumental architecture of thought. It shows thinking isn't just passively receiving things, but actively constructing reality, using contradiction not as an endpoint, but as the fuel for deeper understanding. It's not just listing concepts, it's showing how concepts live, how they move, negate, and realize themselves to become truth. It really pushes you to see understanding as an active, critical process.
Absolutely. It makes you think differently about, well, everything.
Yep.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. When you run into conflicting ideas or contradictions in your own life or thinking, could you apply this lens? Look for the thesis, the antithesis.
And ask how they might resolve into a higher synthesis. And how does reaching that synthesis change how you understood the initial conflict?
Right. Next time you're grappling with complexity, maybe ask, what's the thesis here? What's its opposite? And where might the deeper truth, the synthesis, lie?
It's a powerful way to approach understanding.
Definitely something to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this very deep dive. We'll see you next time.